So in my background, I've outlived my parents when they passed away. So that reinforces to me that I need to make every day count. The origin of this, as indicated from Steve, was 2016. I came back thinking, I don't really know how to retire. What do I do? And I had plenty of land to clear and grandchildren to chase and that sort of thing. But soon after we got back, it was made obvious to my wife Jackie and I that human trafficking was alive and well in Wright County, Iowa. Specifically, in this case, initially, labor trafficking. So when you have millions of chickens in a county, somebody's got to pitch the manure. When you've got thousands of hogs being killed a day, somebody's got to butcher the hogs. And the business model is let's minimize the cost with people that we can exploit to get what we want, and that is maximum profits. Everybody wants to make a profit, but it shouldn't be off the back of somebody that maybe came here intentionally illegally or came here unintentionally illegally, and then when they complain about their conditions or their pay, the federals are called. And we know that from the Postville experience up in northeast Iowa. And that was just one. But we had a guy named Jack DeCoster who made himself infamous in the PBS documentary Rape in the Fields. I highly encourage that. You can look at it online and get to it in about 30 seconds. It features Wright County, Iowa. That pushed me over the line. I started talking to law enforcement. Law enforcement was not interested, had other things to do, and that goes back to having a focus team look at this. And I'll get into that. I have prepared remarks here, but I wanted to start off with that. So it turns out I don't retire well, so I end up doing things down in the State House. The worst enemy we can have is the one who convinces us there is no conflict. We face that enemy today as we process the rabid nature of violence across our nation against those who do us no harm and against those who seek peaceful dialogue. And today's Saturday, and we're in Iowa, and all of you could be at a football game today, but you're not. You're here. And because this is important to you and it's important to our children. I never liked being the spectator as an athlete, and neither do I now. As well, I don't care for pep rallies masquerading as real athletic events. And we have a lot of that in the human trafficking arena too. That's why we're here today. We chose to be in the arena, ending the scourge rather than just wringing our hands. I spent many years chasing bad people, recovering hostages, returning indicted terrorists to the U.S., and I thought I had dealt with the worst of the worst. I was proven wrong when I began the human trafficking mission. I have had serious people ask me why I am passionate about human trafficking, and I'm rather taken aback because, you know, we have property tax debates, we have IPERS debates, we have all kinds of debates in this state, and it all boils down to money. And don't get me wrong, I want property taxes lowered. I pay out of somewhere. I pay a lot of property tax for stuff that I don't think I should, but the point is, if we can't protect our children, then the rest of that doesn't matter. I reply that this is the biggest reason I ran for office, and something I never mentioned I would, or never imagined I would do. I also respond that I have met victims whose stories drove me to action. One of those people was a teenage girl I will call Jane, who I met along with her adoptive mother in the Capitol. Jane had been sold for sex as a toddler. Her adoptive mother introduced us, and I noted Jane use sign language as she spoke. Her mom explained to me that her hearing had been damaged by her traffickers striking her in the head so hard for punishment. After being adopted, it took Jane over a year to utter one word, let alone ask for food or other necessities, because she had become accustomed to exchanging any request she made with further abuse. In her mind, nothing good ever happened after speaking. With great love and nurturing from her adoptive parents, over many years, she has learned to communicate without fear. Those perpetrators have never been brought to justice. That's only one story of many, and it sticks in my craw. The study of history is only valuable if we learn from it. Mark Twain was quoted as saying, "History may not repeat itself, but it rhymes. So indulge me." 162 years ago, President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, a modern-day executive order that sought to free slaves prior to the war's end. In a war that was at first about states who wanted to be separate from the Union, it evolved over time, and in Lincoln's mind, it became a moral imperative to defeating slavery. For Lincoln, that then became a political imperative. As president, he could not lead a nation which allowed the enslavement of his people. Slavery was also about economics. The business model was based on unpaid labor. In today's labor trafficking, similar models are used to minimize labor costs by hiring those who have no choice but to work for hideous wages in hideous conditions. Today, the fight against both labor and sex trafficking is no different, but the political imperative is still key. What do I mean by that? I mean that means that an elected official's election to office or re-election to stay in office should be based on his or her position on human trafficking, what they're going to do about it. I took an oath at 18. That's still in effect. It didn't expire. That was 52 years ago. To support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I didn't think there was any domestic enemies at the time. That oath has no expiration date, as I said. I had no idea that someday I would be engaged in a fight with those who seek to destroy our nation from within. We have passed laws that make punishments for the crime of human trafficking much greater, as Steve mentioned. But those laws are feckless without proactive enforcement and prosecutorial effort. Proactive is an essential component. This is not a crime that is often reported. In fact, it is seldom reported, but the signs are often pervasive if trained and committed people are involved. The good news in Iowa is that we have this law making trafficking a minor a Class A felony, as mentioned. Recently, a man was convicted and sentenced to life without parole in Cedar Rapids. That case while good news, involved a minor who escaped her captor after a few days. She, unfortunately, is the exception, not the norm. Many victims suffer for months or years. Many are discarded before or if they even gain freedom. Once rescued, they have an arduous and long recovery journey. We cannot wait for victims to find the authorities. We must find them. Provide extended treatment, and prosecute both their traffickers and their buyers. We talk a lot about traffickers. There's supply and demand in human trafficking. Unfortunately, it's a business. Whoever buys this needs to be punished as greatly as the person who's trafficking them. In fact, the law states anyone who benefits from the trafficking is punishable under the law. So I would say that the buyer is benefiting in the most sickest of ways. As we know from grid shock, and Stacy's here to talk about that, the buyers come from every walk of life. It's not the dirty old man club. In other words, these are not just the people we consider on the fringe of society. I introduced a bill last session that would create and fund a team of teams. This is what Jeffrey was getting at too, of investigators, prosecutors, and victims advocates in care facilities, working collaboratively under one common superior. We have a lot of well-meaning people right now working the victims front. We have victims care facilities around the state. The reason that woman that young girl made it to court in Cedar Rapids to testify, and that's how brave she was, the victim testified, was because a victim's care person was by her side, literally and figuratively, to help her do that. So that's key. That it's also key to have this under a common superior. Again, from a military perspective, if you have multiple organizations doing their own thing without coordinating with each other, and they're mandated to coordinate with each other because they have a common superior that dictates that, then we just have a lot of people doing a lot of good things that never coalesce and have the synergy that they need to succeed. Did not make it to a vote. I have my own reasons as to why it didn't make it to a vote, but I have the assurance of the new majority leader that we'll get a floor vote in this coming session. This bill will cost millions to create, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I've looked at the DPS director in the eye on various situations and said, "What do you need from us? What do you need from the legislature?" And for a while, I never got anything in response. Then, well, we don't have enough people now to fill the ranks, and we can't redistribute those people. And I said, well, you're not. In my mind, we're going to pay for new people because the capability of talking to a victim is one that very few people have. You're talking about the most traumatized person you can imagine, and you have to figure out when's the right time to talk to them, let alone convince them to testify. So those people are going to be picked over a long time to get the right people. Also, the prosecutors. Prosecutors have to have a similar approach because they're going to have this person in court. They're going to ask them to testify. And if they're not going to testify, then they need to get enough evidence so that they can go to court anyway. It takes a special person to do that. Those teams will take years to develop. Okay, prosecutors must be adept in the law. I ask that you contact the governor, the attorney general, your state senator, your state representative, and tell them you're serious about this and you expect them to be serious about it. Use that word political imperative if you want to impress them with something like you graduated from Harvard or something. Also remind them that the current distribution of resources in the Department of Public Safety is backwards. I'll just use it that way. I won't put the other word in there. It's backwards. Meaning, 2 people and $200,000 are dedicated to human trafficking in the state police force of our state. 2. A few years ago, somebody had the bright idea that we should have gambling in this state. So we have got casinos all over the place. There's 65 state police officers in those casinos, getting $12 million to support that effort. I know that because I'm on the committee that allocates that. I brought that up on the House floor right before we adjourned this spring. 65 and 2. That's not the way it should be. As I mentioned, my passion for defeating human trafficking is intense. You might be able to figure that out by now. But recently it became even stronger. On Father's Day, appropriately, I got a call that followed up on a rather casual conversation I had with a victim's care person in which I volunteered our home to help victims recover. She took me up on the offer. The next day I was picking up a young woman who had had a C-section in Des Moines and delivered a beautiful baby girl, a 3-day-old girl in this case. We of course said yes. It hardened our resolve even more. And what we learned was, not only are victims emotionally and physically damaged, but their innocence is also taken away, along with the opportunity to grow and mature during their adolescence. Consequently, victims are reintroduced back into society, if they get out, without the skills we all learned as teenagers. And we kid a lot about, how goofy teenagers are and how goofy I was as a teenager, but we learned a lot. And we couldn't have become an adult without goofing up as a teenager and having loving parents that, and stern parents in some cases say, no, you can't do that. It's not a good idea to go 80 miles an hour down the lane. Well, in this case, just one example. Young woman that was staying with us was very talkative, which surprised me. And it goes back to, if you met one human trafficking victim, you've met one. There's no templating them. And she mentioned that her trafficker wasn't paying his loan back. And since I'd had several conversations with her, I could ask the question I wanted to ask in as delicate a way as I could without insulting her or hurting her. I said, you mean the money you got from doing things the trafficker told you to do, and you consider that a loan to him? Yeah. So, we've all heard of Stockholm Syndrome. This woman had it on steroids. She gave money to this guy because he called it a loan, and she never saw it. Combine that with a crack habit that he got her on, and you have a person that can be manipulated any way, which way or form. And when we talk about, God Almighty and our prayers to Him, and she wasn't a particularly religious person, but as they say in the Marine Corps and probably the Army, there are no atheists in foxholes. She found herself in a proverbial foxhole. And she's driving into the crack house where her trafficker is that night to touch base with him or whatever she was going to do. But prior to that, she had known she was just strung out on crack and she couldn't take it anymore. And this is her just volunteering this to me. I'm not even asking questions. And so she said, "Dear God, get me out of this. I got to get out of this. I got to get out of this." Night or two later, she pulls into the crack house, and about 5 cop cars are behind her. She gets carted away. She doesn't cause a problem. She just gets carted away because she's got crack on her and she's at a crack house, and she gets charged. That was in a neighboring state, by the way. She ends up coming here. Her social worker, whatever the term is in that state, got her hooked up with a place down here to help her recover. And oh, by the way, she's pregnant. She gave birth on the 13th of July. So her prayers were answered. Not, as we know, God doesn't answer prayers the way we dictate. And neither did He with her. But that baby is 2 months old today, doing well. Mom's trying to is getting her GED. She's at another location now. She's got a job. The victims' care people in this state have been tremendous to her, and they're helping her get there. But again, what we found is my wife and I had to be basically parents. You talk about mentoring and all this, but we ended up being parents. She's still being parented, and it's going to take a while. And that isn't a disrespectful comment to her. It's just that that's the reality of coming out of being isolated in the worst way for a decade and then saying, well, you know, what do I do now? I was in survival training. I'm sure Jeffrey was. We called it SEER, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, Escape. It was 3 weeks. It was pretty intense, I must say, and it taught me a lot. But we were taught by the people that had just been recovered out of North Vietnam. And they came back after 7 years or however many years it was, and they found something much different. And these people aren't POWs, but they're prisoners of demons, not prisoners of war. And the impact is somewhat similar. And they weren't trained for it. In order to defeat this scourge, we must get in the arena and make a difference. Paraphrasing President Reagan, it's been said, if we lose this war, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent it happening. We have at stake in this room our children and our grandchildren. That's what we have at stake. And we have to make a stand on that. And it's not just legislators, it's not just people in the government, it's every one of us making that insistence to public officials. One other reality that keeps me in this fight is imagining 10 years from now, when all 6 of my grandchildren, teenage grandchildren now, are in their 20s, and they ask me, what did I do while I was in the state, while our state and nation was in such dire straits? What did you do in Grandpa in the Great War? I don't want to have to tell them I was busy playing shuffleboard or fishing. So here I am, and here you are. I'll close and go back to my Marine Corps roots. Marines are about mission orders. Tell us what to do and let us figure out a way to get it done, no matter what the sacrifice is. So I'll end this morning like Jeffrey did with Isaiah 6:8. I think it's worth repeating. Then I heard the voice of the Lord asking, who should I send? And I said, send me. I would ask that tonight, before you go to bed, please have that same conversation with the Lord. Thank you.
This one? Yeah. Mark's not going to be here for the panel. He's heading home. Well, not even home. Actually, he's heading to the border tomorrow. Going down with his sheriff and to learn some things and to collaborate and connect with his sheriff. I could go on about that, but I won't at the moment. But a couple things that I want to make sure everybody understands. What he's trying to do is going to take every one of you when we go to session next year, all right? You're going to have to get on the phone. You're going to have to go to the Capitol building when we are coming together. I can tell you that Team Iowa and this man are going to be working shoulder to shoulder from this point on. And I've already told him. I told Mark, you lead, we'll follow, okay? I said, you're the general, I'll be the master sergeant, and we've got the troops. And we need more troops, by the way, okay? We need more troops. But the last thing I want to say is this. In talking to Mark, as we've got to know each other and get closer, the question I've asked him, and we've bounced it back and forth with others as well, is how do we bring this from the flood that we have right now down to an IV drip, right? And as Major Prather said it's going to take a long time, right? This war we're in. But regarding human trafficking, we've come to an agreement. I'd like you to comment briefly, Mark, is we have to cut the demand off at the customer level. In other words, the John. And what we have to understand is these people who are feeding on our children are people oftentimes in very high places in our societies. Whether it's churches, government, business, you name it, these are movers and shakers, and they're being protected. And we have to find a way to call them out, okay? And so I'd just like Mark to comment briefly about that.
Well, pain changes behavior, whether it's literal pain or embarrassment, being perp walked out of your Okoboji condo in your $1,200 suit. So the law is supposed to be equal for everyone. We have to demand that. We're going to need help from the Attorney General on this. When I say there's a common superior, that common superior has to be qualified. I have a person in mind, by the way, and he's done human trafficking for a long time. He's in a good spot to pluck him out of right now. But the good news is this guy was caught in Cedar Rapids. It didn't take a great investigation to figure this out. I mean, frankly. And then apparently in the trial, he's in there making stupid facial expressions, and he's like, I don't care, and all this sort of thing. And with the victim in the room. My point in that is, he was easy to hate. He is a despicable human being. There are people involved in this that you don't think are despicable. So we had, Stacy has more of the details, we had a corn salesman, I think Pioneer, DeKalb, and Humboldt. He got out this year. He was federally charged and got out after about 12 years. Everybody's shocked. How could that be? In this state, seed corn salesmen are not, underpaid. So he had a good life going, but he was running girls up to Minnesota, minors. So we have to be ready for that. And, wherever the evidence leads us, we have to do that. But again, it goes back to that focused team. We had a situation, I can tell many of them, the most recent one was I get a text at 2 a.m. from a friend who's at the Casey's off I-35 next to Dow's, and he's getting some cold medicine. He walks in and he just can't believe it. There's what he envisions or he estimated was about a 12-year-old girl, I will say dressed provocatively, I'll put it that way, with a guy who is then handed to two other guys all around the store. She's looking down. She's never making eye contact, but she knows she can't leave this guy, more than a few feet. My friend got a license plate, got a make and model. As I recall, Chevy Equinox gray, Minnesota license plate. He passed that to the 911 operator. In this case, Franklin County, just east of me. And what do you think got done with that information? That would be one correct answer. That is the only correct answer. Nothing. Because, as we know, trafficking doesn't stay in Wright County, it doesn't stay in Polk County, it doesn't stay in Oklahoma, it doesn't stay in Iowa. It moves, and we have to have a rapid response capability. To me, that would be the highway patrol. If the guy's got Minnesota plates, he's either coming to or going from Minnesota. If we had the right task force set up and they had the authority to task the highway patrol to say, hey, we have a suspect vehicle, look for it, park on the side of the road. The first thing you say is, oh, that matches the vehicle. Now I'll go follow it and see if I can find the license plate. That could have happened if we'd had the capability and the process in place and the authorities in place. It didn't. Same thing happened in Belmont, in another situation. The examples go on. But human trafficking has to be acted on virtually immediately for anybody, for any success to be had. Again, the girl in Cedar Rapids, God bless her. God was blessing her to get out like that. But there are thousands others in this state that can't. And I would just say to parents and grandparents, I heard one policeman brief many years ago, all that child has to do is make one bad decision. They can come from the best home, particularly in the sex trafficking part. Labor trafficking is normally minorities in the state, and they deserve our care and attention too. But on the sex trafficking front, it could be a white child, a black child, a brown child, it doesn't matter. We have to have the capability to go after them quickly and with the right authorities. Again, we want this to go to court. So the authorities are important. Whoever stops and pulls them over. Highway patrolmen, are trained, and I have a lot of respect for the highway patrol in this state. They can figure it out pretty quick when they walk up to a car. What's that child doing in the back? Well, what's under that blanket? Well, it's a child. The child's hiding because the child doesn't want to be seen because the child's being trafficked, and they know they're going to have the bejesus kicked out of them if they reveal themselves. Just like that girl I talked about. So, good enough? Yes, Robert. Yes, yes, and yes. Is it active resistance? No. It's like, no offense to the teenage girls here, but there are passive-aggressive people in the world. And they're passive-aggressive about it. Well, I don't have enough right now. One thing about the legislature, we allocate the money. We approve the money. The governor signs it, and it's done. Now, when I say done, we still got to build the team, and I have a pretty good idea how to do that. But the money part is a big deal. But that's where political imperative comes in. And whether you use that word or not, my support for you is contingent on this. And if it's got to be that blunt. It can't be, well, we really like you to do this. When you get around to it, I mean, I wouldn't be standing here with REP in front of my name if it weren't for this. I would be still clearing trees this morning. But this is too important. And it's not going to get fixed right away. Building that team will take years. But it's got to start now. And it better start after the 2026 session.
Now we can have more than one person.
Well, and that's why it's going to take a while. And I'm reading a book right now called Dangerous Gentlemen. I love it, and it's talking about the role of men that inspire young boys to become a man and to protect those around them and to do the right thing and to do the hard things. Don't take the escalator, take the stairs, just basics like that. And we have to inspire children to do that. We have to inspire them by setting an example.
We need to set the example that the government isn't supporting.
Don't worry about the government. Worry about you and your family.
The government isn't supporting, like, police officers to go do their job. And nobody wants to go in and do that job.
Well, then that's something else you discuss with your elected representatives.
We can put all the money we want to that, but nobody wants to.
Well, I know. It starts with us. It starts with us. It doesn't start with the government. It starts with us. And I don't, let's be blunt. The governor decided not to run. That's called a lame duck. Then the governor vetoed the property rights bill. She tripled down on lame duck. So who's going to fill the void? Nature abhors a vacuum. I would suspect the House of Representatives. Because the Senate, we had to kick the Senate in various parts of their body to get this voted on, and we had 12 very brave senators. Where's Senator Campbell? He's one of them here. Senator Campbell was one of them.
Hello.
We had already passed it in the House. That's just an example of the political dynamics of Des Moines and the Capitol. We may be more in the driver's seat now than we have been. And I can't guarantee that, but it starts with us. And when I talk to my grandsons, thankfully they have real men for fathers. My two sons-in-law, we talk about doing the right thing. We talk about getting physically stronger, morally stronger, and inspiring them to do better things. So I can't fix every elected official, but I can fix what's in my circle of influence. That's what we work on.
Thanks, Mark. I'd appreciate it if everybody stand up, please. And recognize the hard work that he's done since taking office 2 years ago. We very much appreciate it.